right, welcome back. And I love this topic. And I can't believe it's already May. And you know what that
Go
means?
ahead. I don't, so that's why I'm making you do the joke.
Well, everybody out there doesn't know because there's all these memes out there. Roses are red, violets are blue. Um, something. Oh, I forget how it goes, and then it's just blank, and it's a Justin Timberlake thing. But it's that May is coming, so it's got to be May.
Yeah, meh. Oh, Justin Timberlake. Enunciate, buddy. Enunciate.
No, enunciate as well as you dance.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, with May, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we touched on it a little bit last week in our pod called Selfing, and how important self-care and taking care of yourself is to your mental health. But we want to go a little deeper into what Mental Health Awareness Month means and its significance. It was originated, gosh, this is crazy, in the United States just in 1949. Although I say just, and also in some ways that surprises me because I feel like being aware of mental health is a relatively new phenomenon. But it was actually, again, started in 1949, initiated by the organization Mental Health America to raise awareness and reduce stigma surrounding mental health issues. I think it took a long time from that to now. I mean, to me, I feel like with Gen Z, maybe millennials to some extent, but definitely with Gen Z, mental health, the stigma has started to fall away from it. Wouldn't you agree?
Totally. I would also say I know that I'm gonna forget because I am, my mental health related to menopause is a little like is unreliable in
Tentative.
memory. But Michelle Obama also like brought a lot of like she really put the spotlight on really helping people normalize the idea that mental health is health, like mental
Yeah.
health care is healthcare, like healthcare needs to include it, and that nothing else really is going to be upheld. It's the structure for the physical health, right? It's the structure for the
Well,
life,
there is the saying, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. But I think
right.
most people think of that as physical health, but it's true of
But
mental health. If you are not feeling mentally healthy, everything else, even your physical health, will deteriorate.
right, and the quality of life, I think, depends mostly on your mental health. So,
Agreed.
yeah. So I would agree on that. My whole screen just blinked. So keep going while I bring everything up because
I would be
I have
happy
to pick
to.
up a chair. Thank you.
So it actually is observed annually. So every May with various events, campaigns, activities, all aimed at promoting mental health education, advocacy, and support. And you just said this. This refers to emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It really impacts and influences how individuals think, feel, and act.
Totally. Yes. I think it's also essential for coping with stress,
Mm.
building relationships, and achieving life satisfaction, right? And so yeah, talking about self-care last week, like it is the reason you want to have good self-care in place because your mental health will suffer if you don't, and then your relationships will suffer, your jobs might suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a way that people might mask, mental health needs and mental health issues. Really smart people can, really hardworking people can, women can. We can mask it to a point where it starts to feel like a burden, and then it gets neglected, and that's why we are. I think that's why we're in like. I mean, you and I agree on this. Not everyone listening might agree on this, but if you live anywhere on the West Coast in the I-5 corridor, you are no stranger to all the issues these cities are facing with
Yeah.
houseless, people. But I think anyone who actually lives in these cities, plenty of people who don't live in the cities have opinions about it. But any of us who live here, we're just as fed up too. We're heartbroken over it, and we see business owners suffering from it. We see these actual, humans trying to live on the streets, and they're suffering for it, and everyone thinks it's a different thing, right? Is it addiction? Is it jobs? Is it is it laziness? Like, that's such BS. I hate when people say that.
100% BS.
But I always think it's like we don't have the right. Yes, I mean, yes. There's a lot of addiction issues, but those stem from mental health issues. We don't have enough mental health, not just services, because I know that's a whole hot topic. Like if you have the services, they come. Like, we don't have enough mental health funding. We don't have enough, ability to address mental health. And I think that's cascading problem. It's the thing that doesn't get addressed that can lead to sometimes injury or job loss, and then missing a paycheck and then ending up on the street. So and it obviously can very often leads to addiction. So mental health to me just doesn't, you're right. It is much more mainstream now to talk about it and to agree that it's important, but is it still like fundamentally addressed as important? Not yet.
No, I was strictly, you speak to it beautifully. I was really speaking on an individual level, right? Like there was a
Right.
time in our lives where going to therapy was like, you didn't talk about it,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And now, my kids at least, and I think yours as well, they're really open about what they struggle with. Liam has, and when Liam was diagnosed with depression and OCD, like I don't know if we had an actual conversation about it, but we were real, we've never hit it, right? And we talk about it, and I share it on, like, Liam has no problem with me sharing it here, because to me it's like the more you, I remember when I first sort of shared that at one point, and I had several people be like, Liam, because he presents, he's very functional, but he knows when he is going through a rough period. He will text and be like, I need to see the therapist a couple extra times this month, or whatever it might be. There's just no stigma around it. And so I meant more on an individual level, but you're right, from a 30,000 foot level. It was interesting in our primary here in LA, there was a thing on the ballot, and on the face of it, it looked like something you should vote yes for.
Mm.
And because it looked like
They're
this
so good at
money.
designing them that way. Oh my gosh.
Well, and to be fair, I don't know, I'll say it. I really like Gavin Newsom. I'm a fan of his, but it was his proposal, or he backed it, and it looked like it was going to give more services, that it was going to give more inpatient services. And what it turned out to be, and this is why you have to research these proposed, don't just look at it, ask people. Because we went to an event where we asked, we're progressive, so it was a progressive event, and they were like, it's actually vote no for it, because what it's doing is it's taking this pot of money we already have that is for outpatient services, and it's splitting it. So if it goes through, it's actually going to be detrimental. It could mean people get forced into inpatient. It takes away from the outpatient that we need so badly. We really need another pot of money for it. Unfortunately, it passed because on the face of it, it looked like something that should pass. So it does. Even when you're in a state that advocates for that, it can still get effed up for sure.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. And to your point too, that you mentioned about your kids, I think I've told you that it feels like Miles and his peers have just grown up with, they've just walked into it very like mental health is health, and
Yeah.
we should all have therapists. Whereas it took Peter a little, he was a little reluctant. He had a little bit more um like fear or stigma to it at first. Not anymore at all. Like he was
Right.
like,
Right.
this was great, this was, but he in high school, that wasn't something a lot of people were talking about like they are now, where Miles is in school. So that's even been just a little shift right there.
Yeah.
And then also just we're so aware of it because of pandemic. Everybody is, incredibly aware, if they weren't before, watching their young people in their house, like their just mental health decline, not just
Yeah.
our own, but like young people who were so vibrant, just and in addition to pandemic, but so sort of overlapping cell phones. So,
Yeah.
and the way young people use social media can, like, we've just there's been a lot of talk, there's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of screenagers and all that stuff, but so we all talk like we're aware of it, and we can agree, but I don't think I don't think it's yet in our vernacular like how essential it is, and how what we used to think of as quirks is really like
Mm,
a mental health, um like it's part of your mental health profile, right? And that's
totally.
all that means. The way your brain works and affects your emotions is your mental health. And there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing bad about you. There's nothing doomful about where this goes or how it's like there are tools. And the more we normalize it and the more we have care for it, the more we're all going to operate better, not just ourselves, but with each other.
No, I agree 100%. I think, people, perhaps there are people in the world who think, oh, the kids these days, right? They're all with their mental health issues and blah, 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 and mental health days and all this. And like many things that are more prevalent, appear to be more prevalent, autism, ADHD, any mental health issues. We just didn't have the language. It doesn't mean it didn't exist when we were growing up. We just didn't have the language for it. And so I am like, hallelujah, amen, that we can speak about it in a way that makes sense. You're right. Are we doing anything about it? I'm clearly on social media. I run our social media, so
Yeah.
that's not, it's not,
Well, as
it's,
I said, how young people use it.
yeah, yeah, yes,
I think,
agreed.
yeah, I think that,
No,
you know,
no, we can fall prey to that stuff too.
true. I just think the attention is more on what's
Yes,
happening with bullying and things like that.
agreed.
But you're right, that can happen to, we know, we coach people who get really depressed because of social media.
So we're going to dig into sort of how it affects middle-aged women. Dare we call ourselves that? Because I don't feel that I don't. I still think of middle-aged women and think of the Golden Girls, and I don't identify that way.
No, but
But
then you think of Sex in the City, we're
and
like,
I do
no,
identify that way.
not Sex in the City,
Yeah.
sorry. Just like that. That's
Oh, and
what it
just like that. That's true. They are the same age as the Golden
yeah.
Girls. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do identify that way. But, anyways, we're going to talk more about that in a second. But why don't we just start with talking a little bit about what the MHA sort of
Yeah.
intended?
Yeah, I like these things that we sometimes pay attention to, you and I sometimes, right? This month, like it's been kind of fun to think about that, and it makes me want to remember when Epilepsy Awareness Month comes around to
For
like just do
sure.
more to share with people. But Mental Health Awareness Month is super important to me and to you, and even my kids who don't pay attention to a lot of that stuff because I don't know. I don't know if you and I have ever talked about it, but my family is very aware and have known people who have taken their lives. And so, I know there is a suicide prevention month, but I think it does start with being really aware of and more compassionate with everybody's state of mental health. Um, and from what I understand, it expanded to a month-long observance to address the growing need for mental health awareness and support. So the goal is to raise public consciousness, reduce stigma. So important. That's kind of really our whole point of this episode is we want to reduce stigma. If you listen to last week's episode, you'll hear how like Lisa and I just we are really good at emoting.
Sometimes we're on a thread ourselves.
Yes, like we are so good at emoting because that's how we take care of our mental health. Like if
Yeah.
we're authentic about how we're doing, it really does actually help because there's no stigma. We're not trying to hide alone with sadness or anything like that. And to promote understanding of mental health issues.
Yeah, I mean it's about education, right? Which I do like to think of this pod as that, especially when we focus on these sort of broader topics. Um,
We educate with our own flavor and our own knowledge of things because we don't know everything.
we are not professionals for sure. We're just professional podcasters at this
Yes.
point. But yeah, but again, I think in a way to reduce stigma, you have to understand the literal spectrum of mental health conditions that exist out there. As I said, Liam suffers with OCD. Charlotte does too. They both Liam has depression, Charlotte has anxiety, Charlotte had body dysmorphia at one point. And once you understand that it comes in a package that looks like Charlotte and Liam that are very functional, you realize that where that you could be sitting next to somebody that suffers for those things, and you yourself might be suffering or challenged by it. Suffering is probably not the right word. I don't think of my kids as suffering with it. And then the importance in seeking help. I already talked about like the policies and the resources to improve access to mental health care, encouraging individuals to, as we did last week, we're doing again this week, prioritize their mental well-being and seek support, perhaps professional, perhaps in your own community when you need it.
Yeah.
That nothing is wrong with asking. There's nothing wrong with asking for help.
Right. And I just want to re-emphasize that, like, stigma and discrimination and like referring to someone as crazy, or like eye rolling about somebody, like, or doing this, like, this, maybe, I don't know if our kids' generation does that, but that's a total thing from our generation. Like,
Totally.
doing this, if you obviously can't see me if you're listening, but like pointing to your head and kind of making a circle with your
Yeah.
finger, right?
Yep.
Like, that's a way we start to judge people who weren't showing up the way we, like, thank God, thank God we don't all show up the same way, but really, like, that stigma and discrimination often prevent people from seeking help and accessing the appropriate mental health care. So the more we can, like, increase awareness and foster empathy and understanding and acceptance by talking about it, by making it normal, by like, oh yeah, I live with dyslexia, I live with OCD, I have anxiety. These are things that, like, my favorite color is blue, hopefully, like, hopefully it's just like, this is how I approach life in the world, and how I succeed, by taking care of those parts of me. Not part of me I hide and hope you don't find out, or else I'm going to lose my job, but actually, like, this is how I show up. I mean, when I think of, because my son has an intellectual, my mild intellectual disability that's related to something, with his health, it could show up as mental health, right? Like that,
Sure.
that can look like, what's wrong? Like, like, is he okay, right? And I'm like, yeah, he's more than okay. He's like actually a brilliant soul. I don't think people who have a huge understanding of all, like, the vast menu of ways that people can show up and still succeed in life and still contribute, and when they don't, that's usually comes from fear and ignorance. So the more and more we can increase the awareness and educate people and just talk about it, it will destigmatize it. And we just, like, when I think of the people I've known who have suffered the most, it's because sometimes of family culture around, like, there's too much shame in seeking help, and we just want to do away with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think because of you making the quote unquote what we would have said in the 80s, it's like they're crazy, so you're doing the finger thing. Maybe we'll edit this out, but I wonder what you think about Joker, because obviously the new trailer is out. I personally think that it is helpful in some ways. Yes, the Joker is a
What do you
villain.
think is helpful?
I think the way they present mental health, and now obviously I've only seen the trailer for the new one
I thought
that
you meant this is helpful, and I was like, wait.
no, the movie The Joker
Got it.
with Joaquin.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really interesting way of talking about, that character and their mental health issues. He was someone who his programs were cut, and he's very eloquent, I would say, in talking about that in the first movie. Obviously, I've only seen the preview for the second movie.
Yeah, that's.
Do you think it adds to the discussion, or
No.
does it not?
I mean, it would if somebody decided to watch that on a surface level, for sure. But no, I think my assumption is the intention there and the actor's intention there was to really portray just the bleak place we are in with mental health, because mental health supports were cut and are cut,
Yes.
and what happens and where that leads, right?
That's what I think too. Yeah.
It's a very fascinating way of doing an origin story of a villain. And
Yes.
And it's just, it's so uncomfortable because it's true. that
Agreed.
I don't think everyone can stomach it, but I think they're missing out on a brilliant performance and a really important discomfort for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
no,
We're
I
on the
think it's
same
helpful.
page.
I think
Yeah.
it's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Sorry. We watched the preview a couple of times for the new one coming out in October, and it was reminding me of his performance however many years ago that was. And you're right. I think you nailed it. It's an uncomfortable movie to watch because it's true. Yeah.
yeah, Peter and I had endless discussions about that. Like it was how dark and honest it was.
Yes.
You mentioned that, and I don't know if you saw my eyes just kind of glaze over because all I can think about is Gaga, isn't it?
Oh my
That's so
God.
cool.
Have you seen the preview?
Yes.
Oh, I can't wait. I was so against it when I heard, not her, because I love her, but I was like, oh, a musical. But I think whatever they're going to do with it is going to be spectacular.
Yeah, the musical part has thrown me, but I trust.
I do. After seeing the preview, I 100% trust.
Right.
All right, we've sidetracked, but
Yes, we have. And
we love to do a little pop culture stuff. So
we'll
that
leave it
was
in. We'll leave it in.
totally. Okay. So let's talk about the impact of mental health on middle-aged women's overall quality of life and functioning. We kind of
Right.
dug into this or started to touch base on it last week. But, yeah, we both fully believe that this can be the beginning of the best chapter of your life. We have retreats named that. We, even within our own personal struggles, I still feel like we do that for ourselves. We still feel that way about our part of our life, but we do face unique stressors. We are the sandwich generation. We are working. We may not see an end to working. There is no such thing as a guaranteed sort of retirement age anymore. I have no idea when I'll stop working. Darren doesn't have any idea when I'll stop working. So we have kids, we have aging parents, we have hormonal changes, huzzah. And if we neglect our mental health, yeah, exactly. That was a double bird for those of you not watching on. And
My double bird is to the timing. It's just so cruel.
I mean, it is. Well, you know what though? Puberty is too. I was at an
Oh,
event last
yeah.
night, right? I was, and I just, mm, God is a comedian.
Yeah.
When I was at an event last night and we were talking, there was a middle school teacher there, and the middle school teacher said, "This is kind of the worst time of a kid's life." And then Charlotte said later, "I try to block out my entire middle school years." So there, you're going through puberty in middle school, and you're going through menopause at this unique time of all of these other stressors by nature of just where we're at, work, family, aging parents. And so it really, if you neglect your mental health in this time, it can lead to additional stress, depression, anxiety, and all of those can lead to impaired functioning. It's just that simple.
Sure. And P.S. bonus points when you are like starting menopause and you have a middle schooler.
Oh, yes. A middle school girl. So fun.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So fun.
Yeah, I think women who are in this stage of life, whether you're, really mature in your 30s or, you feel really youthful in your 50s, you can't really escape that, like what you're just saying. We're at a higher risk for depression, anxiety, mood disorders compared to any other age group, middle-aged women, like, and that's technically 40s, 50s and beyond, right? Like 40s,
Right.
50s, early 60s. That is true. That is true because I think I don't know if you and I have discussed this, but I definitely that's the majority of who we coach.
Yep.
A lot of them are experiencing this stuff for the very first time. They have no baseline for it. They've never, like, I never, my mom was depressed, but I never was, or my sister was, this is like hitting them like a Mack truck. Like, well, this isn't like me. I don't get like this. And I was like, okay, you're still you. You're experiencing this stuff.
Yep.
And it's super normal. Doesn't make it easier, doesn't solve anything, but does it help to know it's normal? Maybe a little, right?
Well, and then going back to cougar puberty from last year,
Yeah,
if you're being what feels like being gaslit by your doctor and saying, "Oh, you're too young to be going through all this," then you think, "What is happening to me?" So
right.
if you are not lucky enough to have a doctor that understands what all of this means and how it impacts your mental health,
Yeah,
it could feel really
right.
infuriating.
Because it's factors like it's your hormones, it's
Yep.
whatever life transitions you or your family are going through, it's your caregiving roles, bingo. I mean, I can check all these boxes, right?
Hmm.
Societal expectations, all of that contributes to mental health challenges, all of it.
Yeah, no question. So let's talk about sort of the intersections between mental, emotional, and physical health. We touched base on this a little bit last week when we were talking about selfing. Um, but mental health can influence physical health outcomes,
Yeah.
including cardiovascular health, immune, chronic disease management. When we talked last week about my hip pain, chronic pain is exhausting. And I feel impaired in all areas of my life when I am having a high pain day. I will text you and be like, I am in, and I'm just calling it high pain day. I don't know what else to call it because there are days that it's not so bad. But
Yeah.
on those days, I feel depressed. I feel angry. And and sometimes I can't prioritize the things that I know will mentally make me feel better because I can't physically do them.
Mm-hmm.
So, being able to, when you can, and we sort of said this last week, there are going to be days, perhaps weeks, maybe, God forbid, months where you can't for whatever reason. Um, but when you can prioritize mental health, it can lead to better overall
Yes.
health and quality of life.
Yes. That's true. I think it's true. And the way, I mean, I think it's a chicken egg thing and everyone's different. And
Yeah.
we've been in this in detail last week, but um, for some, this is not true for everyone. And it makes the people who it's not true for feel like there's something wrong with them and there isn't. But for a lot of people, really prioritizing their physical health takes care of their mental health,
Yeah.
and stop. You know what I mean? Like that's it. That's all they need. If I move, if I run every day, whatever it is, then and they notice that their mental health suffers when they don't. And it's easy to say that's enviable, but that's not saying that they don't suffer. It's just saying like that this is like what they know they need to do.
Right.
Um, However, like if you can't, or if that doesn't do it for you, luckily, we live in a time where there is so many modalities
Yeah.
that help with that, right? So it's like, I like, I mean, take me for example. I think I went to, when I realized I was, I went from like having a month-long period to none, and like my iron left the building and my energy left the building, and I felt kind of crazy trying to get someone to even agree to send me for a blood test. Oh, you don't need it. I'm like, I really do. I feel like I do. Luckily, someone finally heard me and they were like, oh my gosh, your estrogen left the building. I didn't know. You would
Did you
think.
have anything left in the building?
What do you mean? Oh, because of
I'd
iron
say
left the
iron
building.
left the building, your energy left the
Well,
building.
those were the two things that explained everything. So yeah, I don't know. What did I have left in the building? Sheer force of will, my wit. I don't know. But I had both those gone and I needed to get help with that, right? So there was some of that that really helped once we figured it out. It wasn't an overnight thing. It took a few months to get the levels right, but my
Yeah.
energy started to return. I started to feel more like myself. So that's where I got help with the physical stuff, my body stuff, and that started to elevate the mood, right? However, there wasn't a lot we could do about the fact that I was losing a lot of sleep. So, there's like all these little tweaks. It's kind of, I don't know, like watching a switchboard or even sailing a boat. Like you have to kind of, there's levers and things like that. For some people, it's just like the fuel is movement. Let's go forward. And for me, it's like this lever, this lever, this lever. And just pay attention and like start to use these tools to keep yourself afloat. And so it got me really good and fine-tuned at like, oh, okay, what I know my baseline is I can do. And then when things start like if I'm not sleeping because I got woken up by a puppy or by a seizure, then I know how to compensate for that because I've had to pull all those levers and try different things to get the right settings to just feel like me. Which sounds super tedious, and it was, but it isn't anymore because I had to deep dive into it because I didn't want to just be like low energy and blue. Who
Well,
does?
yeah, well, true, but it also sounds like allowing yourself to really understand your body,
Mm.
right? And instead of jumping to a conclusion or jumping for some sort of self-medication, whether it's shopping or whatever it might be, right? It doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol, but just any kind of like self-soothing, really trying to hear and listen to your body. And then also advocating, and when you're in the midst of this, to then have to advocate for yourself, it adds another layer. But I mean, again, if you go back to last year and listen to Amy Pickard and Cougar Puberty, or your friend that I'm sorry. Oh, what was your friend's name? I'm sorry, I forget her name. Your doctor friend who did the hormone.
Oh, Krista.
Krista. I was going to say Krista, and I knew that wasn't right. Yeah, Dr. Krista. I mean, those are three. As much as I didn't want to do a menopause pod, I want to call back to those three pods from last year because they were really. It's interesting because I'm seeing some other friends of mine on Facebook now who may apparently don't listen to the pod, and that's totally fine. Starting to talk about menopause, and it's so fascinating because they're talking about it like they're the first ones to ever go through it.
Oh,
But we all feel like that because we don't talk about it.
right.
Doctors don't know. So I'm not making fun of that. It's just fascinating as we are getting older and our friends are reaching their 50s and they're starting to go through this. That's what I'm seeing is they're like, nobody talks about this. Nobody talks
Yeah,
about this.
true. It's true. I think people talk about therapy a lot. That's
Yeah.
one modality. That's
Yep.
one. And there's different types of therapy. Like, I think we've talked about this before. Like I like to talk, so I assume that the best kind of therapy for everyone would be talk therapy, and it isn't. There's a lot of other types of therapy that have nothing to do with talking. There's like the eye movement one, EMDR, right?
Yep.
What does that stand for again? Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy for people with trauma, which
Yep.
does affect our mental health. And I don't really know anyone in the past 5 years that hasn't had some level of trauma.
For
If
real.
and so for some people, things like, and that's just one example, things like, the eye movement therapy can really shift mental health. For some people, it's acupuncture
Mm-hmm.
do that. So there was a
Somatic.
lot of modalities. Yes, so many modalities out there that can help. And so like there's no reason to live with it. There's no
Yeah.
reason to think, oh gosh, there's something wrong with me. I just, like no judgment if you can't get out of bed, but please just plant that seed somewhere in there. Hear this, that like there's definitely something that can help. And I am someone who exhausts them all and felt like nothing's going to help me. And I've felt that way many times when I was exhausted. And I wasn't even thinking about it as mental health. I was thinking about it as physical health. Like nothing's going to help. And it
But I
it
think that's a
it always comes.
real, I think about, let's make it simpler. When you have a really bad cold or you have the flu and you're
Right.
on day 3, you think this is never going away. I don't know when I'm ever going to feel better. I feel that way about my hip. I think, I
Right.
don't know what that's going to look. I literally cannot imagine getting up from a chair and just walking without having to stand up, breathe through the pain, remember to walk with my non-dominant leg. Like I cannot comprehend what June is going to look like for me, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really normal when you're in the depths of what might be a mental health crisis,
Yeah.
or a physical health crisis, to feel like there's nothing that's going to help. Again, it's only temporary, and hopefully we are planting some seeds that allows you to remember when maybe you feel a little bit better, there's somebody you can reach out to.
Yeah. There's something. Yeah. And that reminder that this isn't you. This
Right.
is you experiencing something really shitty, but it isn't you,
Yeah,
you
we
know?
can't say that enough.
Yeah.
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 um so we're always talking as coaches, so yes, there's therapy, there's somatic, there's tons of different modalities, and coaching can be one of them. We are not mental health uh trained by any stretch of the imagination. I'll be transparent. I have never gone to therapy. But I do feel like I process a lot with, and I'm lucky to be surrounded by coaches. So that is that feels more comfortable for me at this stage of the game. I'm not against therapy. Quite frankly, I've thought about it quite a few times in the last few years, but it's really hard to find therapists. So, I finding other ways to serve yourself. around this. And we talk about, as we did last week, self-care practices, encouraging stress management techniques, mindfulness, relaxation, healthy habits, making sure you're fueling your body in a way that is serving you versus not serving you, nutrition, sleep, regular exercise, that sort of things. I mean, those are the things that can be the first steps while perhaps you are waiting to find a therapist.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And if you're listening and you feel like you're struggling in any way, it's not really your job to diagnose, is this trauma? Is this not, like, if you're struggling, you're
Correct.
struggling. You are worthy of seeking help for it in any way you choose. So I think reaching out to a therapist, and if that's hard for you to do because you don't know, like our friend Elijah is really good at reminding you can go to, is it therapy.com or therapist.com?
Yes. Yeah, something like that.
And you can, like, okay, these are the areas that I'm struggling, or these are the things I want to do, and then you can look, like, kind of whittle it down to three, and you can try them all, like,
Yeah.
it's great until you find the one for you. Like, it can be that easy. So look for online resources, or what your insurance provider provides, or do you have a community center that has people who run groups or do some, pro bono counseling, anything that gets you even a conversation to kind of think about, yeah, I have had trauma, or it doesn't really matter if I had trauma, I'm not myself. Whatever it is, it's not your job to diagnose it. Just have a conversation that leads to somebody helping you get a diagnosis if that's what's needed, or find the support you need. I really encourage it, like, not instead of, but in addition to, or at least at the very least, seek supportive networks and communities aimed at supporting women, right? So if you don't already have a group of women friends, or if you do, but you feel like that makes it worse, we're all just in a bad place together, it's important to seek or consider creating your own space to connect, or just find out, like, what's available. And you'd be surprised. There's meetup groups for,
Yeah.
women around every topic, from, recently divorced to empty nesters to infertility. Like, what are women, like, they're struggling around some topic and they get together, and those supportive networks are just incredible. I, as a volunteer, once a month, hold, although it's that's another story, but I coordinate a group of women who are all moms of kids with special needs, right? So that's mental health,
Oh,
uh
yeah.
support for us, because we have the same shared experience. And so wherever you can find something like that, even if there's just one person you need to maybe say, "Can we walk together once a week? It's just so nice to see you and be seen," right? So, like, that's our encouragement around, like, for Mental Health Awareness Month. Yes, be compassionate. Remember that everybody's dealing with something, but be compassionate with yourself. And you don't have to, like, go, "Well, I don't need help because I should be." No,
No.
right there. We
Gotta stop you right there.
do something to take care of your mental health. If you're already
Yeah.
doing something, turn it up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice that we live in a time where it seems like there is advocacy for very specific gender sensitive mental health policies and services. Um, but we still need that to do those to do that reach out and to continue to do what we can to promote funding and resources for research on women of a certain age. I'm tired of saying middle age. So women of a
Yeah.
certain age. And because we talked about this last year. There is just not a lot of research on what we go through. Most of the research that's out there is based on men. And so they don't really know what menopause does. They don't really know what the drop in estrogen does, let alone all the very specific. I mean, you might have an amazingly supportive partner. It doesn't matter. Women still hold things differently than men do. Not a diss on men, it's just a simple fact. And so really making sure that when we have an opportunity to step in and speak up and promote and support funding for mental health research for women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, it's incredibly important to do.
Thank you for saying that. I'm having, like, an aha moment of where things are coming together, and there's, like, this one, Venn diagram thing at the center, and that's the
Yeah.
mental load, the mental load. Like what
Mm,
blocks women from having more joy, more fun, from feeling sane, like all these things. And like because men are aging too. Like
sure.
they're going through their own, like loss of memory, loss of vision and all that. But if we age and we still hold the mental load,
Yep.
no wonder it is such a clusterfuck.
Truer
Right?
words were never spoken.
It's like if I'm gonna lose my memory, why can't I lose the mental load? Oh my gosh. And like to your point, and what we've been saying this whole time, like I think it's really important if you have care providers who aren't asking about that, who aren't addressing that
Mm,
or listening to that, like get a new one because
yeah.
any good healthcare provider out there, whether it's a nurse, a physician's assistant, a nurse practitioner, a physician, naturopath, if they're not like doing an intake that includes how you're feeling emotionally and mentally and the other things going on in your life that all contribute to whether something's going on with your gut or your skin or your vision, whatever it is, like if they're like kind of seeing that as separate and like that's not what I do, it's not like a red flag or anything, but you're not getting the full picture of what mental health, like what healthcare workers are supposedly being trained to include now, right? Like you're not getting that. You might be seeing someone who's a little old school or doesn't specialize in that. Go to someone who is not afraid to talk about your mental health as it relates to everything else.
I was
Um,
just sitting here thinking as you were saying that, and it has been a little over a year since I've had a physical, and I have a pre-op appointment next week for my hip. So maybe they'll ask me this. But I was thinking about how I know when the kids go in for a physical, they ask those questions.
mhm.
I assume I was asked them too, but now it's my mental my memory is such that I don't remember. Do you have doctors that ask those questions?
You know what's funny? I think the reason you and I don't know for sure is because we offer that stuff anyway. We just
Well,
do.
that's
We
true.
we are just like, here's me, and this is also the like me. Like I mean, I don't think
Good
you and I are
point.
sitting there like overly chatty, but I think we're just really helpful in those
Yes,
appointments.
you're
So
right.
I don't know if I've had to be asked that.
Good. Touche. Because I was just sitting here, I was like, do they ask me? Because I know they ask the kids, have you been suicidal? Have you this? Like they straight up ask those questions of the kids. And
I
I know it
I
because they
really
tell me them.
hope, God, I really hope of like any woman in any healthcare situation, I hope that they get asked all those questions because women
Yeah,
are just, yeah, we were not conditioned to, share all that stuff or think that it's
true.
even normal. So
Yeah.
it's good. I mean, yeah, I think I'm like, I want the most out of my time. Here's what I want you to know about me and go ahead and look under the hood, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're probably right. I probably tell them before they ask. That's a very
Yeah.
good point. You picked another great song this week. Avril Lavigne is a favorite here in the house. Darren is a huge fan. The kids used to be, but Darren has stayed one. So
Oh yeah. Well, you and I both coached the same person who is a huge Avril Lavigne fan. I don't know if you remember who that is, but
I don't. You'll have to tell me
yeah,
after the
I
fact.
will. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that also brought the music back to me. But it's Head Above Water. And the lyrics are, I gotta keep the calm before the storm. I don't want less. I don't want more. Must bar the windows and the doors to keep me safe, to keep me warm. Yeah, my life is what I'm fighting for. Can't part the sea, can't reach the shore. And my voice becomes the driving force. I won't let this pull me overboard. God, keep my head above water. Don't let me drown. It gets harder. I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. Don't let me, don't let me drown.
Mm.
Yeah.
That gave me full body chills to hear you read that.
It's there was a word in there that I can't believe didn't come up yet. Maybe it did, but is safe, right?
Yeah.
That's your barometer for your
Yeah.
mental health. If you don't feel physically or emotionally or mentally or like even socially safe, and I don't mean that in the extreme case of like dire emergency. I just mean, if you don't feel safe and at home, you get to get some support around that.
Right. So I think what you're saying is it's not about like you're not safe in your home. You are not physically feeling
Yeah.
safe because things are and I do think you physically feel it in your body.
Yeah, I meant at home with yourself, like really truly at
Correct.
home with yourself.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Thank you
just wanted
for
to clarify that.
clarifying
But
that.
it's like,
Yeah.
like I know when I'm having a mental health day, when I'm feeling anxiety, I feel cold, I feel antsy. I mean that's, I'm not gonna say I was having a mental health day with the opening of Violet, but on that day, I ended up canceling a client and I told her why. And I said, I feel antsy, I don't feel focused. I would not be the best coach for you today. And here's why. And of course, she was lovely and said, for sure. And we rescheduled. Um, and that's advocating for myself, right?
Yes.
Like I could have just
Yes.
blown on through and kept going. And quite frankly, when I coach, I'd let go of myself and I'm focused on my clients. So probably would have been fine. But in the moment, I just kept thinking about 1 o'clock and thinking like, I need to not be talking to anybody. I need to just be like focusing on me and my energy. And so I feel I'm obviously lucky that I have the role I have. But yeah, it's I think yeah, safe is, what safe feels like and you know what it feels to not be safe.
You're making me realize too that like you and I are not advocating for like just shitting the bed and stopping everything and just giving yourself permission to like fall apart, although we do. We totally
Yes.
do. That's not it. We're not, it's not the opposite of fake it till you make it. Like, don't fake it, be
Right.
honest. And just like, it is literally like you will actually make it farther if you don't fake it. If you
Yes.
speak to everything that's coming up for you, you're actually going to accomplish way more because you will get there because you cleared it
Yeah.
and you're going to get the support you need. Fake it
Yeah.
till you make it is just like a band-aid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is only the beginning of May and Mental Health Awareness Month. I suspect, we don't know for sure, but I suspect we'll have a few more conversations about that this month. But regardless, I hope if there's anyone in your life that you think this might benefit, as we said earlier, and I'm not saying this jokingly, we don't have all the answers. We are not trained therapists. This is information that we've learned that we wanted to share, coupled with our own personal experiences, both last week and this week's episode. So take it for what it's worth. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, we love you and we wish the best of you for you every week for sure.
Yes. Here's to ours and your mental health. And thank you for being with us.
Cheers. We'll see you
Cheers.
next week.
Bye.